A 17-year-old girl was put up for sale by her own parents, until a broken black widower intervened. In a dusty town on the edge of the frontier, whispers carried across the square, a young girl, just 17, stood on a crude platform as her parents prepared to auction her off like cattle. Among the crowd, jeers and greedy eyes marked her fate. But one man stood apart, a widower worn down by loss, scarred by poverty, and judged by the color of his skin. He had no wealth to flaunt, no status to protect him, and yet he stepped forward. What happened next would shatter the town's silence, ignite old prejudices, and leave everyone questioning who truly held power that day. The year was 1879, deep in the aftermath of war and upheaval. The country was still finding its footing, but old hatreds remained firmly rooted in the soil. In a small western town, people clung to rigid traditions, measuring a person's worth by their skin, their land, or the weight of coins in their pocket. Among them was Samuel Carter, a black widower who had once tasted love and family, only to have it ripped away by disease and misfortune. His wife's passing left him broken, and his days were marked by silence, his nights haunted by memories. He carried grief like a heavy coat, worn and frayed, its edges ragged. Poverty shadowed his steps, and though he worked tirelessly, the townsfolk never allowed him to forget his place. It was during a Sunday gathering that whispers turned into a spectacle. A desperate family, drowning in debt and blinded by shame, made a cruel decision to sell their own daughter. At just 17, Mary Beth stood trembling on the wooden platform her father had built. Her eyes searched the crowd, hoping for mercy but finding only calculation. Men in the crowd smirked, some eager to possess her, others mocking her parents for their disgrace. Women whispered behind gloved hands, scandal mixed with curiosity. The sheriff stood by, indifferent, declaring it a private matter. To the townsfolk, it was nothing more than a transaction, a cruel bargain dressed as survival. But Samuel, standing at the edge of the gathering, felt his chest tighten. He saw not just a girl, but a reflection of every injustice he had endured, every time his worth was questioned, every moment his humanity had been dismissed. Something inside him stirred, a fire he thought long extinguished. The bidding began. The father's voice, strained with false confidence, called out a starting price as though he were selling livestock. Coins clinked, hands raised, and laughter echoed across the square. Each bid was not just a number, it was a declaration of power, a reminder of who could control a young girl's future. Samuel's heart pounded. He had little to offer, barely enough to keep himself fed through winter. Yet as the numbers rose, his resolve hardened. He remembered his wife's voice, her gentle insistence that kindness could change the world, even in the smallest acts. He remembered the child they had once hoped to raise, the dream that had slipped through their fingers. Now, staring at Mary Beth's pale face streaked with tears, he felt that dream flicker alive once more. But the crowd was not kind. Murmurs rose the moment Samuel stepped forward. Faces twisted with disdain. Some scoffed, "What business does he have here?" Others spat words laced with venom, reminding him of the line society had drawn. To them, his presence was an intrusion, an insult to the order they believed unshakable. Still, Samuel did not waver. He placed his small pouch of coins on the platform, the sound of metal ringing louder than the jeers. His offering was meager compared to the bids being tossed around, but his eyes met the father's with unwavering resolve. The father hesitated. Greed battled with pride. To sell his daughter to a black widower was to invite scandal, to provoke outrage from his peers. Yet the weight of his debts pressed harder, and in Samuel's gaze there was no mockery, no lust, only a fierce, quiet dignity. The crowd erupted. Men shouted, demanding the sale be halted. Women gasped in shock. The sheriff's hand hovered near his weapon, unsure whether to intervene. Every prejudice, every unspoken rule of the town was now on trial. Samuel stood tall, though his hands trembled slightly. He knew this act would not bring him respect, nor acceptance. Instead, it would bring whispers, suspicion, perhaps even violence. But he also knew that walking away would mean condemning the girl to a fate worse than his own loneliness. With a voice steady as stone, he insisted his bid be honored. The father, cornered between shame and necessity, reluctantly nodded. And in that moment, Samuel did something the town would never forget. He reclaimed humanity in a place that had tried to strip it away. The square erupted into chaos. Angry shouts pierced the air as men demanded the auction be redone, claiming Samuel's money wasn't worth the weight of a real man's coin. The sheriff stepped forward, torn between the law and the hatred burning in the townsfolk's eyes. Mary Beth stood frozen, trembling as her parents shrank into silence. For them, the decision was made. Their debts would be paid, but the cost was beyond measure. Samuel reached for her hand, steady and gentle, but the crowd surged closer. A rock flew past, striking the dust near his feet. "Not here," Samuel muttered under his breath, shielding the girl as the tension reached a breaking point. His heart raced, not from fear for himself, he had faced worse, but from the thought of losing the chance to save her. Then, something unexpected happened. Among the crowd, a few voices rose, not in anger but in defense. A schoolteacher, weary of the town's cruelty, spoke up. A mother, clutching her child tightly, whispered words of support. Their voices were small, drowned by the mob, but they cracked the silence of complicity. The sheriff, sensing the fragile balance tipping, finally raised his hand. "The sale stands," he declared, his voice firm. The man paid fair. His words were reluctant, but final. Silence swept across the square. Rage simmered, but no one dared cross the law openly. Samuel, with Mary Beth at his side, stepped away from the platform. Each step was heavy, each glance filled with venom, but he did not falter. For the first time in years, his grief gave way to purpose. Samuel brought Mary Beth not into a life of servitude, but into safety. He offered her shelter, not ownership, dignity, not chains. In his small home, still carrying the traces of his lost wife, he found a new reason to keep going. For Mary Beth, freedom came not from wealth, but from the courage of a man whom society deemed powerless. The town never forgave him. Whispers followed him at the market. Doors closed quietly as he passed, and prejudice sharpened its claws. Yet Samuel no longer walked in the shadow of grief. He carried his head high, knowing he had chosen humanity over silence. Mary Beth grew stronger with each passing day. She found her voice, her strength, and in time, she spoke out against the cruelty she had endured. Though Samuel never sought recognition, his act of defiance planted a seed, a reminder that even in a world built on division, compassion could break the cycle of hatred. Years later, when the story was retold, it was not about a girl sold by her parents or the shame of a family in debt. It was about a broken man who refused to stand idle, who stepped into the fire of hatred and walked out carrying hope. And perhaps that is the question left behind for us all. In the face of injustice, when silence is the safer choice, will we stand back? Or will we step forward even if the world turns against us?